Well, hello, welcome back to another exciting video on how to purchase your first gun. This is part of our new gun owners series. Now, those of you who have been watching these videos repetitively may have seen this video suddenly disappear from our website. There was a reason for that. When I initially did this video, I had used my information to show how you go through and purchase a firearm. Well, my daughter was paying attention to the video and she noticed that in the process of doing so, I had inadvertently shown my driver's license and my car registration, both of which had my address on them. And while I love all of you tremendously, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, in all candor, I don't want you showing up at my house unannounced. So we decided to refilm this video and kind of walk you through the process, this time having edited out some of that personal information for me. Let's talk about this. The purpose of this video is to walk you through the entire process of purchasing your very first handgun in the state of California. A couple of disclaimers right off the very beginning. If those of you from out of state are watching this video, and we do actually get a number of people from especially the East Coast, which I find kind of interesting, are watching this video, your state rules regarding buying a handgun in your separate states are going to be a little bit different than that of California. So you can watch it, but understand there may be some fundamental differences. This video is really intended for how a California resident would purchase their first handgun. And for those of you who live in free states, you might want to watch this to kind of see what California residents are having to put up with. I think there's some educational aspects to that as well. All right, so you have decided to buy your very first handgun, and you've actually had to go through some hurdles initially, even for this process. The very first thing you had to do, obviously, was research different firearms and make a decision as to what you want to buy. And then you wanted to make sure that you had the legal capability of buying a firearm. And for this, we have to look at state law. There's always going to be a nexus between state and federal law. Now, there are going to be subsequent videos that go over very, very specific aspects of this process. But this video is sort of a broad overview, sort of a start to finish. Pardon me. In California, if you want to purchase a firearm, be it a handgun, a long gun, a shotgun or a rifle, you have to have a firearm safety card in your possession. There are certain exemptions to this. If you have a concealed weapons permit, if you're an active duty law enforcement officer, if you're a retired law enforcement officer, there's certain exemptions, but as a general rule, you have to have an FSC card, okay? There's going to be a video on how to actually prepare for the FSC test, but it's a relatively simple test. It's really nothing more than a tax, to tell you the God's honest truth. But you have to go through this relatively rudimentary test and then be issued a firearm safety card. I pulled an image of a firearm safety card off of the internet. It looks vaguely similar to this. This is obviously much larger than what a normal FSC card would look like. It's about the size of a regular credit card, but visually it's going to look somewhat similar to this. So you're going to have to initially compile some documents before you head on off to the gun store to pick up that gun that you've had your heart set on. The first thing that you're going to want to do, of course, is make sure that you have a valid driver's license. And as you can see, Carolyn, I've redacted my personal information off of that. The driver's license, number one, needs to be a current driver's license. It cannot be one that's expired. If it has expired, you're going to need to have the addition that shows that it's still a valid driver's license. Alternatively, if you don't have a California driver's license, you're going to need to have a California identification card. So regardless of whether or not you actually operate an automobile, you're going to need something from the Department of Motor Vehicles that says that you are in fact a California resident. You're going to want to, as I said earlier, make sure that you have your FSC card with you. Now, in all candor, a lot of times people, when they go to buy a firearm, they'll take their FSC test at the time that they're buying the firearms. So if you don't have it right now, you'll have to do it during the purchasing process. It's just, for most people, easier to have it. You're going to want to have some form of secondary identification. Most common one is going to be a utility bill, or in my particular case, a car registration that shows that I'm in fact a California resident and I live at that address. One backup on the driver's license. Many people will have a driver's license that does not have their address on it. Okay, they'll have a PO box on it. There's security reasons why people choose to do this. If you have something like that, it is going to be absolutely critical that you bring 2 additional forms of identification that show your actual address. Again, it could be a car registration, it could be a concealed weapons permit. In my case, I could use my military identification. Okay, something that shows that, hey, this person is actually a resident of the state of California. And there's a nuance to this. Under the 1968 Gun Control Act, you can only buy a handgun in the state in which you reside. Okay, so if I happen to be traveling to Arizona and I want to purchase a firearm because I found one in a gun store that I was simply perusing, since I'm not an Arizona resident, I would not be able to buy it. I have to buy it only in the state that I reside. So I've got all my documentation in order. I drive over to the gun store. I see under the glass this sweet P239, this Sig Sauer 239. And I say, okay, great, I want to buy this gun. Well, the first thing that they're going to do is have me fill out what is called a 4473 form. Now, up to this point, I have been talking about California law. All right. Now we have to switch to federal law. The 4473 form is a federal document, and you are signing it under penalty of perjury. Okay. Now, this form does change from time to time, and it recently has. This is the new 4473 form. And there's certain things that we need to discuss about this form. First and foremost, you're going to need to fill out the majority, not all of it, but the majority of all of these individual boxes. Most of this was actually going to be filled out by the clerk at the gun store, but there's certain things that you're going to have to actually go through. Number one, of course, is you're going to have to talk about, you fill out your last name, your first name, and then right here you're going to see where it says middle name. Some of you do not have a middle name. You can't simply leave it blank. You're going to actually have to put down NMN, stands for no middle name. And it actually tells you that in the directions right over here. Okay, so you're going to have to fill out all that. Of course, you're going to have to fill out your place of birth, whether it was a foreign country, height, weight, your sex. Under question number 14, congratulations, you now have 3 options under sex: male, female, and non-binary. Then you're going to put in your birth date. Your social security number can go in number 16. I'm going to tell you personally, I don't recommend that you put your social security number on this document. It's completely optional. They suggest that you put it down to help with misidentification. It's too important of a number. I suggest you keep it to yourself. Okay, I would leave that one blank. Unique personal identification is also something that you don't have to put down. Then it's going to ask you your ethnicity. This one I find to be really interesting and unbelievably troubling. Under question 18A, they're very, very specific. Are you Hispanic or Latino? If not, are you not Hispanic or Latino? This is a very, very specific question. They evidently want to have some sort of record as to whether or not Hispanics or Latinos are buying guns. Then under 18B, it tells you you must put down one of them. You're either an American Indian or Alaskan Native, you're Asian, you're Black or African American, you're Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or white. Evidently, all of the racial breakdowns can be devised into just simply those categories. Regardless, you have to put down both 18A and 18B. Now, for those of you who are constitutional scholars or lawyers that happen to be watching this video, you probably have already looked at this and said, well, that is an absolute violation of federal law to be asking for racial makeup as a condition of being approved. Yep, that's what it is. It's absolutely illegal, but it's there. So you're going to have to fill that out. It's then going to ask you a whole bunch of very personal questions as to whether or not you're a fugitive from justice, you've ever engaged in the use of marijuana. Actually, more specifically, it says, are you an unlawful user or addicted to marijuana, any depressant stimulant, narcotic drug, or any controlled substance? And then it gives you a disclaimer. Warning, the use or possession of marijuana remains unlawful under federal law, regardless of whether it has been legalized or decriminalized for medicinal or recreational purposes in the state where you reside. This is actually factually accurate, okay? Now, had you done marijuana in the past, it doesn't make you a prohibited person from actually getting a firearm. However, if you are currently using marijuana, you are in fact prohibited from purchasing or even owning a gun. Now, what the past means remains to be seen. I smoked marijuana 3 days ago, but I've chosen not to do so again. I don't know. You're not necessarily an lawful user or addicted to marijuana or a depressant. In any event, it's silly, but it's there, and we have to deal with that. Once you've completed, essentially violating all your Fifth Amendment rights by answering all of these questions, you then are going to sign it right here. That's pretty much the end of your process. The gun store clerk will then fill out the rest of the 4473 form. They'll put in their own information and things like that. And at that point, a 10-day waiting period starts to accrue. So oftentimes you will hear people refer to drozing a gun. Okay, drozing a gun, and it literally is DROS. That's the acronym, which stands for Dealer Record of Sale. That statement has turned into a verb and suggesting that this is the way that somebody is in the process of acquiring and subsequently registering a firearm within the state of California. All right. A droz essentially begins the process where the state starts looking at whether or not the individual that's trying to acquire the firearm is legally allowed to be in possession of it. And it initiates a 10-day waiting period, okay? That's for all guns, and the only time that you are exempt from the 10-day waiting period is if you have a very specialized FFL and the gun that you're purchasing is a curio and relic, or if you're a law enforcement officer, you have what effectively is a letter from your chief of police. Generally speaking, though, there's always going to be a 10-day waiting period, even if you already have a number of firearms in your possession. The waiting period is intended to do two things. Number one, it's intended to make a determination by the state that you're not a prohibited person. Number two, it's to help you cool off. Literally, it's called a cooling off period. If your intent was to buy the firearm for the purposes of committing some sort of crime of passion. Now, that seems kind of odd. If you already have 25 firearms in your possession, why would you need to cool off for this particular firearm? If you really have, malcontent in your heart and you intend to victimize somebody, why is this gun special? But that, all notwithstanding, that's the law. Now, during this 10-day period, and it's to the minute, okay? It's not just simply the day. If you started the droz process at 1 o'clock on January 1st, you're not going to be able to pick up your firearm until 1 o'clock on January 10th, all right? It's a legitimate full 10 days. Now, during this time, the state is doing a background check, and they effectively do a double-layer background check. The first thing they do is make a determination as to whether or not within the state of California you fall under a prohibited status for, pardon me, for purchasing a firearm. One of the biggest things that happens is that there is a law in California that says you can only acquire one handgun from a dealer every 30 days. Okay, there's some exemptions for private party transfers, but generally, again, it says you can only acquire one handgun every 30 days. Well, this is like the number one thing that people end up running afoul from. You know, they buy a handgun, and 28 days later, they're at the gun store, they see another firearm, they want to buy that one, they think it's been 30 days since their last one. They initiate a DROS process, and a few days into that DROS process, sure enough, they're given a denial because it's too close to the last one, okay? Sometimes people have criminal backgrounds and they just simply forgot about it, or they tried to skate through the system. Regardless, the state is going to issue either a denial, okay, during that 10-day period of time, and actually, they have up to 30 days to make this decision. Or alternatively, they're going to issue what's called a delay. Now, there's a second level of analysis that takes place at the state level. They also instigate what's called a NICS check with the federal government. So you may have not committed any crimes within the state of California, but you committed a felony or a crime of misdemeanor domestic violence when you were living in Oklahoma. Well, that's recorded in the federal database. So they're doing a statewide search to make sure that you're not prohibited in California. They're then doing a federal search to make sure you're not prohibited anywhere within the United States. Assuming that they don't find anything, they're going to issue an approval to the gun dealer right at the moment that the gun can potentially be released, okay? On the other hand, they may issue a denial, all right? And if they issue you a denial, they'll send you a letter saying, they won't tell the gun store this, but they'll send you directly a letter saying you've been denied because, you know, you have been identified as being a prohibited person because of a criminal event that took place in 1972 or something along those lines. And then you could start an appellate process if you felt that information was incorrect. Or alternatively, they'll tell the gun dealer, we can't make a decision. There's still weird information floating out there. So we're going to issue a delay. And they can issue that delay up to 30 days, all right? On the 30th day, they have to basically fish or cut bait. They have to issue an approval, they have to issue a denial, or they can also issue what's called an indeterminate. An indeterminate is effectively the state punting, all right? And they basically tell the gun store, well, we really can't decide whether they're legally allowed to have a firearm or not, so gun store, we'll kind of leave it up to you. Now, as a practical matter, most, especially corporate gun stores, are going to treat an indeterminate the same as a denial. They're not going to release it because they don't want to incur the liability or anything like that. But those are the possibilities. The vast majority of DROSs are approved. I mean, I'll just tell you that right off the bat. But we do deal with issues from time to time. And sometimes those issues are going to require actual legal representation in order to get the record corrected at the state or the federal level. Regardless, 10 days later, assuming that you've been approved, you can then go back to the gun store and pick up your SIG 239 or any other firearm that you're interested in purchasing. And then it's yours. It's registered to you, and you are good to go. And of course, again, in California, the next time you can start another DROS process for a handgun will be 30 days from your original one. Anyways, I know it's incredibly complicated, and the state of California has, in fact, set up this rubric essentially to make it very, very difficult for you to be able to exercise your fundamental, specifically enumerated civil rights. You can only imagine if it was set up this way to do something like vote or get married or something along those lines. Anyways, that all notwithstanding, that is the terrain in which we are currently deployed. If you have any questions at all, definitely you can talk to the people at the gun store. They are all firearms professionals and they understand the process very, very well. Okay. You can always contact us or contact me directly by simply emailing me at steven@artemishq.com. And as always, I want you to train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.